Sometimes, the people who love you the most are also the ones who see you the least. They look at you, but they don't really see who you are. Not until you do something so undeniable. It shakes the very ground they're standing on. My name is Jessica Barrett. And this is the story of how my parents labeled me a failure. How I lost everything I thought I wanted. And how, without even meaning to, I ended up building something far greater than success. In the next few minutes, I'm going to take you behind the closed doors of a family empire. Through betrayal, heartbreak, and a twist no one, not even me, saw coming. If you had met my family 5 years ago, you would have thought we were the perfect American success story. My father ran Barrett Construction, a billion-dollar empire. My mother managed our social calendar like it was a second business. And my younger brother James, well, he was the golden boy, destined to take over everything. Then there was me, Jessica, the one who didn't quite fit into the blueprint they had drawn. While James was studying business management, I was halfway across the world, working on school projects in villages no one could point to on a map. While they toasted deals over champagne, I was hammering nails into broken walls, teaching kids how to read under open skies. They didn't call me a failure outright. Not at first. It was the little comments, the tight smiles at holiday dinners, the way conversations would shift when I talked about my work. "That's sweet, Jessica," they'd say. "But when are you going to come back to the real world?" They measured success in profit margins and skyline views. And by that yardstick, I didn't even register. It's funny, isn't it? How easy it is for people, even the people you love, to mistake passion for naivety and compassion for weakness. What they didn't realize was that while they were building towers, I was building something too, something they couldn't yet see. And soon, it wouldn't just be a few scattered schools. It would be an empire of a different kind. One that didn't just reach for the sky, but planted roots deep into the heart of communities. I didn't know it then, but everything was about to change. One morning, a letter arrived, crisp, formal, bearing my family's crest. "Emergency family meeting," it read. "Mandatory attendance. No excuses." And just like that, I was summoned back into the world I had long since learned to survive without. I still remember the way that letter felt in my hands. Heavy, stiff, official. Emergency family meeting. Mandatory attendance. No excuses. Funny how words can sound like an invitation but feel like a sentence. I hadn't been back to Barrett Construction's law offices in years. The massive oak doors of Harrison and Associates loomed larger than I remembered, the gold-plated name shimmering under the morning sun. As I pushed through them, it wasn't just the building that felt heavy. It was the weight of a lifetime of expectations I had never met. Inside, my parents were already seated at the head of the polished mahogany table, dressed in matching black suits as if still in mourning. Mourning. Not for my grandfather, mind you, but perhaps for the empire they thought they were about to lose. James lounged casually, scrolling through his phone with a kind of arrogance only someone born into power could afford. And me. I took the last seat at the table, the outsider at my own family's gathering. "You're late," my mother snapped, checking her diamond-studded watch. I glanced at the clock, 5 minutes early. "Traffic," I said simply, folding my hands in my lap. Sometimes you don't need an official announcement to know you're not welcome. It's written in the sideways glances, the tight smiles, the unspoken conversations that pass over your head like you're not even there. Mr. Harrison, my grandfather's lawyer for over 30 years, sat quietly at the end of the table, a thick folder resting before him like a sealed fate. And for just a moment, I caught something strange in his eyes. Was it pity? Or something else entirely? My father straightened his tie, his voice crisp with rehearsed authority. "We all know why we're here," he began. "Dad's estate needs to be properly distributed to ensure the company's future success." James looked up, flashing a grin. "Shouldn't take long," he said. "The company shares obviously go to me. I'm the only one who understands business around here. I could have said something then. Reminded them about James' string of failed ventures. How he'd sunk 3 businesses before his 30th birthday. But I stayed quiet. Because sometimes, silence says more than any argument ever could. You don't always have to fight every false narrative about you. Sometimes the best way to respond is to let the truth reveal itself in time. As my father droned on about preserving Grandpa's legacy, about the importance of loyalty to the Barrett name, about how failures don't deserve an inheritance, I sat there, feeling the final bricks being laid in a wall they'd been building around me my entire life, brick by brick, word by word, year after year. And they thought this meeting would be the last stone. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Grandpa had been building something too. Something they could neither see nor stop. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, his fingers tapping lightly on the thick folder in front of him. My father leaned back, arms crossed, oozing certainty. My mother tightened her jaw, already rehearsing her victory smile. James. He didn't even bother looking up from his phone. It was supposed to be a formality, a final act of dismissal. But life and Grandpa had other plans. Mr. Harrison flipped open the folder and began reading, his voice steady and clear. Walter Barrett, having amended his final will 6 months prior to his death, hereby transfers the entirety of his trust fund, including controlling interest in Barrett Construction, to Jessica Barrett. For a full 10 seconds nobody moved. Not a cough, not a shuffle. Even James' phone slipped from his hand, clattering loudly onto the mahogany table. My father was the first to recover, spluttering in disbelief. There must be some mistake, he barked. My mother gasped audibly, her perfectly manicured hands trembling against the table's edge. But Mr. Harrison only smiled, just a little, and calmly slid forward another document. No mistake, he said. This was your father's decision. And it's legally binding. It's a strange thing watching certainty collapse, like seeing a skyscraper buckle from its own weak foundation. My father, usually so composed, turned red with fury. James stared at me, mouth slightly open, like he couldn't quite believe the room hadn't rearranged itself to suit him. And me. I just sat there, not gloating, not giddy, just fit. Because in that moment, I wasn't thinking about money or power or revenge. I was thinking about Grandpa, and the quiet ways he had been watching me all along. Mr. Harrison pulled out a handwritten letter, its edges slightly worn, and began to read aloud. To my family. Grandpa's voice began, steady even in ink. If you're hearing this, then the truth I kept hidden for 5 years is finally coming to light. He spoke about my humanitarian work, about how what my family called wasting money on charity was, in fact, one of the most successful business ventures he had ever witnessed. How I turned a $2 million seed gift into a $30 million operation, building schools, clinics, community centers, not just structures but foundations for better lives. Sometimes the people who truly matter aren't the ones who shout the loudest, but the ones who watch you quietly, believe in you quietly, and when the time is right, lift you higher than you ever thought possible. As Mr. Harrison closed the letter and slid the legal documents toward me, a realization settled deep in my chest. Grandpa hadn't just left me a company, he had left me a challenge. A chance to rebuild something that wasn't just about concrete and steel, but about hope, about purpose, about building a legacy that would actually matter. And that's when it hit me. The real meeting wasn't happening at this table. It was about to happen out there, out in the real world, where dreams either live or die by the choices we make. As Mr. Harrison finished reading Grandpa's letter, the weight of his words didn't just settle in the room. They settled deep into my chest. For so many years, I had believed I was invisible. That my late nights spent working in makeshift offices, my travels to forgotten villages, my struggles to stretch every dollar into a future for someone else. None of it mattered to anyone but me. But I was wrong. Someone had been watching. Someone had seen it all, and understood. Grandpa didn't measure success the way the world did. Not by quarterly profits, not by flashy headlines. He measured it by impact, by the number of lives changed, by the strength of something built to last longer than a balance sheet. When he gave me that initial $2 million, he hadn't handed me a gift. He had handed me a test. And what had I done with it? I built an education foundation that now operated in 12 countries, with a higher success rate and lower overhead than any similar organization in our sector. I negotiated partnerships with governments, coordinated complex logistics across continents, managed projects that delivered sustainable solutions in some of the hardest environments imaginable. In short, I hadn't just built schools. I had built an international operation from scratch. Real success doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it grows quietly, like roots beneath a tree, invisible to everyone, until one day, the whole world sees the strength you've built from the inside out. And now, Grandpa's final gift wasn't just wealth. It was trust. Trust that I could do for Barrett Construction what I had done for distant villages and overlooked communities. Build something that mattered. As Mr. Harrison slid the final set of documents across the table toward me, there was no turning back. Company, legacy, a future, all now resting in my hands. Tomorrow, I would step into a world that never thought I belonged, and show them all just how wrong they had been. The next morning, I arrived at Barrett Construction's headquarters before the sun even kissed the city skyline. The security guard at the front desk looked up, did a visible double-take, and quickly fumbled for his radio. "Good morning, Miss Barrett," he stammered, his voice a little too loud in the empty lobby. "Welcome back." The word back echoed in my mind. Only I wasn't coming back to take a seat in the audience anymore. I was here to step onto the stage. Grandpa's old executive keycard, now mine, slid easily through the scanner, and the private elevator hummed as it carried me upward, floor after floor, past the empire he had built from nothing but grit and a dream. When the doors opened, I stepped out into a place that felt frozen in time. Grandpa's office was exactly the way he had left it. Polished wood, deep leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows gazing out across the city he helped shape. Awards and photographs lined the walls. Proud moments of ribbon cuttings, groundbreaking ceremonies, business milestones. But it wasn't the glossy portraits or gleaming trophies that caught my eye. Hidden behind the grand displays, almost as if tucked away on purpose, was a small, worn photo. It showed a much younger grandpa, standing proudly in front of a modest schoolhouse, a dusty building with peeling paint. But the pride in his eyes shone brighter than any skyscraper ever could. Inscribed at the bottom of the frame were simple words. First Barrett Community Project, 1973. It hit me then. Barrett Construction hadn't started with luxury condos or high-rise office towers. It started with a single school, a place built not for profit, but for possibility. No matter how far we climb, our true foundation is laid in the first small thing we dare to build. The thing built not for glory, but for good. I crossed the room, gently lifting the old photo from its dusty place, and placed it front and center on Grandpa's massive desk. Because this, not the glitter, not the gold, was the heart of what I was meant to protect. This was the true legacy. My phone buzzed. A new message flashing on the screen from James. "This is insane. You can't run a construction company. You build schools in the middle of nowhere." I smiled, not with anger, but with a quiet understanding. Because what James didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that building a school in a remote village required every ounce of construction expertise, logistical planning, budget management, and negotiation skill that running a skyscraper project ever could. Each school I had built, each center I had opened, wasn't just an act of charity. It was training, brutal real-world training in resilience, resourcefulness, and leadership. And tomorrow morning, I would take those lessons into a boardroom that thought they already knew who I was. They didn't, but they were about to find out. Before we move forward, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever found yourself standing in a place where you once felt invisible, but now, suddenly, you're the one leading the way? Maybe it was stepping into a role you never thought you were ready for. Maybe it was proving, to yourself or to others, that you were capable of so much more than they ever imagined. Share your story in the comments. I truly believe that sometimes the most powerful journeys come from the moments when no one else believes in us except ourselves. I'll be reading through them, and I can't wait to hear about your moments of quiet strength. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the tension inside Barrett Construction's headquarters was thicker than the summer heat. I wasn't walking into a simple meeting. I was walking straight into a battlefield. Word had spread fast. Jessica Barrett, the family failure, was now sitting at the head of the empire. And not everyone was ready to accept that. At precisely 9 a.m., I stepped into the boardroom. A room lined with men and women in sharp suits. People who had built their careers under my father's rule. Who had learned to equate tradition with security. My father stood at the far end, surrounded by his closest allies. My mother sat in the observers section. Her usual flawless poise starting to crack just slightly at the corners. And James. Well, James looked like he was ready to bolt for the nearest exit. I didn't let the weight of their stares drag me down. I remembered something Grandpa once told me. The loudest room is usually the room most afraid of change. Mr. Harrison called the meeting to order. My father wasted no time. Before we proceed, he barked, I demand a vote of no confidence. Jessica has no experience in real estate development. She'll bankrupt this company within a year. I didn't respond with words right away. Instead, I connected my laptop to the presentation screen and clicked open the first slide. A world map appeared, covered in bright dots across continents. In the past 5 years, I began. I have overseen the construction of 47 buildings in 12 countries. Our average project completion time, 4 months. Our budget variance, less than 2%. Our success rate, 100%. The board members leaned forward, whispers rustling like dry leaves. James interrupted from the observer section, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Those were just little buildings, not real estate developments. Smiled. Teddy. Next slide. Images flashed across the screen. Advanced technical training centers in Kenya. Sustainable housing projects in Cambodia. Modular hospitals in rural Peru. Each project built to international standards. Many completed under budget. All still standing strong. Serving communities, creating real change. Don't ever let someone else's narrow view define the size of your achievements. Real impact isn't measured by the price tag. It's measured by the lives it touches. I turned back to the room, my voice firm but warm. Barrett Construction was never meant to be just another luxury brand, I said. It was built to last. It was built to make a difference. The final slide appeared. Grandpa's photo, standing in front of that first tiny schoolhouse, with the words, "Build for tomorrow, not just today." The room fell silent, not out of anger, not out of disbelief, but out of realization. Somewhere deep down, even those who clung to the old ways recognized the truth written on the walls of that boardroom. Mr. Harrison stood. "The vote of no confidence has been called," he announced. "All those in favor, please raise your hand." My father's hand shot up immediately. Stiff, angry, desperate. Long pause. And then, nothing. One by one, the board members kept their hands firmly at their sides. Few even smiled. The motion failed. Unanimously. Except for one lone, shaking hand. As the meeting adjourned, I sat there for a moment longer, letting it sink in. I wasn't just sitting in Grandpa's chair. I was finally stepping fully into my own. As the boardroom slowly emptied, I sat there for a moment longer, soaking in the silence. It wasn't the sound of celebration. It was the sound of something even better. A clean slate. For the first time in Barrett Construction's history, the company was no longer tied to empty tradition. It wasn't about keeping up appearances. It wasn't about building monuments to ego. It was about building something that mattered again. Looking back, it was almost surreal. Just a few days ago, I had been the daughter nobody believed in, the so-called failure who didn't deserve a seat at the table. Now that table was mine. True leadership isn't about demanding loyalty. It's about earning trust, by showing up standing tall, and quietly doing the work that needs to be done, even when no one's applauding. Over the next few weeks, the shift inside the company was almost palpable. I wasn't interested in flashy changes. I didn't storm in swinging a hammer, tearing down everything Grandpa had built. Instead, I listened. I met with every department head, not in their offices but in the field, on construction sites, at project meetings, even in dusty break rooms. I asked questions they weren't used to hearing. What problems are we not seeing? How can we do better? Not just faster or cheaper, but smarter and stronger. Where can we build something that actually changes lives, not just skylines? And slowly, the company began to change. We pivoted towards sustainable development. We partnered with local governments for infrastructure projects that actually served communities. We launched training programs for young architects and engineers from underserved areas. Profits didn't just recover, they soared. In the first quarter alone, our revenues rose by 40%, driven not by cutting corners, but by creating real value. Barrett Construction became known not just for luxury, but for leadership, for innovation, for heart. And maybe the most surprising thing, my family slowly started to change too. My father, once my loudest critic, now watched in quiet respect. My mother, who once cared more about charity galas than actual charity, began organizing real partnerships that helped fund community projects. And James? Well, James was still James. But even he started asking different questions. Questions about how to build better, not just bigger. 1 year later, as we stood preparing to unveil the Barrett Legacy Project, a mixed-use development that blended affordable housing, luxury residences, and a community education center, I realized something. This wasn't just a victory. It was the beginning of something entirely new. The rooftop gardens were blooming. Solar panels gleamed in the morning sun. And downstairs, waiting for us in the plaza, were hundreds of people. Workers, partners, families, kids from our education programs, all ready to celebrate not just a building, but a future we had built together. Success can change numbers on a spreadsheet, but true success changes hearts. For most of my life, I thought my family would never truly see me, not for who I was or what I could build. I thought that bridge had burned a long time ago. But it turns out sometimes, if you build something strong enough, even broken bridges can be rebuilt. Didn't happen all at once. Healing never does. Started with small things. My father showing up unannounced at the opening of our first community center, standing quietly at the back of the crowd, his hands shoved awkwardly in his pockets. It continued when my mother started attending meetings with our philanthropic partners, not to pose for pictures, but to roll up her sleeves and help organize scholarship drives. And James, well, James surprised me most of all. One afternoon I found him in the office, hunched over a blueprint for a new technical training facility, asking serious questions about how we could make it more accessible for young builders. It wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about understanding. Finally, after all these years, People don't always change because you tell them to. Sometimes they change because you show them a better way. And you give them the space to walk across the bridge at their own pace. As we prepared for Barrett Construction's 50th anniversary celebration, I looked at my family and saw something I hadn't seen in a very long time. Not perfection, not pretense, but possibility. We weren't just standing on the ruins of old expectations. We were standing on the foundation of something new. Built stronger, built together. The rooftop gardens were blooming. Solar panels shimmered in the sun. Children from our education programs were gathering in the plaza, their laughter rising into the morning air. And my family, the family that once saw me as a disappointment, now stood beside me, ready to build a legacy that truly mattered. The plaza was buzzing with life. Children ran across the freshly paved walkways. Families gathered near the community center. And reporters set up their cameras, preparing for the big announcement. Today wasn't just another ribbon cutting. It was the celebration of something bigger. The unveiling of the Barrett Legacy Project. As I stood on the stage, overlooking the crowd that had gathered, I took a deep breath and looked around. My father stood near the front. His posture no longer stiff with disapproval, but relaxed, almost proud. My mother wiped a tear from her eye, smiling warmly at the children planting flowers by the entrance. And James. He stood tall, holding my niece on his shoulders, both of them wearing shirts that read, "Future Builders." When I stepped up to the microphone, I wasn't just speaking as Jessica Barrett, the so-called family disappointment. I was speaking as the woman who had finally built something that mattered to everyone in the room. 50 years ago, I began. My grandfather laid the first brick for Barrett Construction, not to chase profits, but to build possibility. Today, we continue that vision with the Barrett Legacy Project, a place where luxury apartments support affordable housing, where solar panels power community centers, where young people have the tools to shape their own futures. As I spoke, images of our new developments lit up on giant screens behind me. The sustainable buildings, the rooftop gardens, the training centers already buzzing with new life. True legacy isn't measured by the height of the towers we build, but by the strength of the communities we leave behind. We unveiled a special plaque, mounted near the entrance of the education center. It bore Grandpa's favorite words: "Build for tomorrow, not just today." Below it, a photograph of Grandpa, not at a business gala, not at a ribbon cutting for a skyscraper, but standing proudly in front of that first tiny schoolhouse, the same one that started it all. The applause was thunderous, but for me the most important sound came a moment later, when my father, the man who once doubted me most, placed a steady hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Your grandfather would be so proud of you, Jessica. And so am I." As the celebration continued, I stood quietly for a moment at the edge of the rooftop garden, watching children explore the new community center, couples move into their first affordable homes, workers proudly touring their green-designed offices. The city stretched before me, familiar yet somehow new, and I realized we hadn't just saved Barrett Construction, we had reimagined it. We had built not just for today, but for generations to come. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low over the city, I found myself back on the rooftop garden, standing quietly by the blooming rows of fresh seedlings. In the distance, the skyline shimmered, filled with buildings that bore the Barrett name. But tonight they meant something different. They weren't just symbols of wealth or ambition anymore. They were reminders of possibility, of hope, of what happens when you build with your heart, not just your hands. My father joined me at the railing, coffee in hand, not a corporate latte this time, but a simple cup from the community center's own little cafe. He looked out across the city and said, almost to himself, "Your grandfather was right about everything. even about you. I smiled, not out of pride, but out of peace. Sometimes what looks like failure through one lens is actually the quiet construction of something extraordinary. Success isn't something you inherit, it's something you build. One day, one project, one life at a time. Looking down, I watched my niece Emma planting flowers with her classmates, their tiny hands pressing seeds into the soil, their laughter rising like music. The future wasn't something waiting out there, far away. It was already growing, right here, right now. And for the first time in a very long time, I knew we were building it the right way. Because real success isn't just about reaching the top. It's about lifting others as you climb. It's about leaving a trail strong enough for the next dreamer to follow. It's about building for tomorrow, even when no one's watching. Thank you so much for staying with me through Jessica's story today. I hope it reminded you, like it reminded me, that sometimes what others call failure is just the first step toward something far greater. Success isn't about fitting into someone else's definition. It's about staying true to your purpose, building your own path, and creating a legacy that means something real. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of Jessica's journey resonated with you the most? Please share your feelings and reflections in the comments below. I truly love reading what you think. Your stories inspire me too. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful journeys like this one. Until next time, keep believing in the dreams only you can see.